Namaste. Happy Thursday, everyone. Hope you all doing great. Let me know where you guys are joining me. And hello, everyone. Yes, great. Let me know where you guys are joining me from. Today, I'm doing a join live with Jeff. It's going to be about relationship. And what is it or where is it that men and women are different in the dating games? So, hi everyone. Hello. Welcome. Namaste. Let me know where you guys are joining me from so I know where our most audience are coming up here. Thank you. And I'm just going to wait for Jeff to join me. He has a lot to share with you guys about dating and the difference between men and women in this field. So let me add Jeff, and without any further ado. Okay, let's go. Yeah, but you didn't tell me where are you guys. Okay, Paran is joining us from, good morning, Jeff, from Switzerland. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing
I am
fine. How are
great.
you?
So I know our topic is very interesting today, and I know that you have a lot to contribute to this live. Okay, Tara from Germany, welcome everybody. So let's dive into it, Jeff. Where do you want to start?
Well, we were having a conversation, and I want to make sure that we're in line a little bit. Well, we don't have to be, but I was looking at the post that said, you're sexier the more spiritual you become.
No.
Did you want to talk about
a story
that, or you want to talk about
nothing to it has nothing to do with our life.
Okay. So we were having a conversation about a few different things. Which exactly did we want to cover today? The differences, the kind of like the gap, or what? Because there's a lot of material there that we can talk about. So what do we want to specifically nail in on?
You said it in your text. So what is the difference between when men and women are going on a date, right?
So I believe if I'm correct, one of the things that I mentioned was opportunity.
Right.
It's like optimism versus pessimism. So that's one thing that we were discussing, which is, when we see somebody, when we go on a date with somebody, that this is not true for everybody. Of course, there are exceptions. But generally speaking, there is an optimistic nature with men and a pessimistic nature with women. Now, we typically associate positivity with optimism and negativity with pessimism. So let's be careful in how we understand and hear that. So to say that men are more optimistic and women are more pessimistic doesn't make men better than women. This is not a good, wrong, better, right, any of that stuff. What it is simply looking for a reason for something to work versus looking for a reason for it not to work. And that just gets down to primitive drivers, primitive mating instincts, where historically women, humans, and animals have to be careful who they're going to mate with, what animal they're going to allow to mate with them. So there's a filtering mechanism, a filtering way of being. And so when I say that there's a pessimistic way of being, it's really that there's a filtering way of being that's having women, female animals, looking at the male animal saying, no, here's a reason for it not to work. Here's a reason for it to filter out. Let me filter out, let me filter out, let me filter out, let me filter out. And that is all to achieve the goal of making sure that a woman mates with the best possible mate, because men have the ability to have multiple mates. Kind of, how do I want to say this? Because women have a womb, there's much more at stake for a woman to mate. There's 9 months where she's going to be completely unavailable for other mates, and possibly much more than that. And there's a lot in, kind of if a woman has a kid and kind of the social ramifications of that, tribally speaking. But let's not go down that rabbit hole. Let's simply look at just genetically, primitively, where if a woman gets impregnated for 9 months, she's unavailable to other mates. But men can have as many mates as they want effectively. They can just go and impregnate and impregnate and impregnate and impregnate. So there's much more at stake for a woman, which is why women are more pessimistic and tend to filter men out. It's all being generated, even though that occurs to us up here in our head, it's really being generated at a primitive level of, am I going to allow this person to tie up my body for 9 months?
Let's stay focused, Jeff. What we had conversation last week was, you were basically talking about how when guys go on a date, they're asking to get a yes. Yes, choose me. Yes, pick me. Yes, I'm the right one for you. On the contrary, women are looking for red flags. Women are looking for why you cannot be a good candidate. So elaborate on this part.
That's right. Well, everything that I was just saying, there's a personality test out there called the Big Five Aspect Scale, and it is the only personality test that licensed psychologists actually subscribe to. They believe in the effectiveness of, and they use it. And in that, there's a trait called neuroticism. There are 5 traits, and then they're broken down into 2 sub-traits. So in that, we'd find that, let's say, women are more agreeable, men are less agreeable. Women are more neurotic than men, which means they're more inclined to negative emotion than men are. It's in that neuroticism that's in line with the filtering out. With men, there's more extroversion and less neuroticism. So that combination is going to cause a man to be looking for the yes. Let me see how she could be a possibility. It doesn't mean that men don't reject women. It doesn't mean that men don't go on dates and say, you know what, she's not the one and I gotta let her know. It doesn't mean that men don't break up with women. It doesn't mean all kinds of things. It simply means that there is a more optimistic approach to a date and a more pessimistic approach to a date. As you said, and as we both are saying, men are approaching that date saying, let me see how she could be a yes, and women are looking for reasons to kind of make him a no.
Okay, so let me know, guys. Do you agree with what Jeff is saying? Do you believe that men are more going to get a yes, or women are going to get more no or yeses? Because at the moment, when we're talking about this, the majority of women are thinking, especially the one who are, they call themselves being unlucky in love, and they go on a lot of dates, or they even get into partnerships, which I'm facing the majority of time, especially this past week. It happens that many coaching sessions that I was doing, they were telling me, I'm so unlucky in finding the right partner. They all show up at the beginning. They're so into me. They're finding so many good traits about me, and they're like, oh my God, you're this or this or that. But eventually they leave. So they're considering this $1 million question. What is it that all these men showing up at the beginning, and they're like, oh wow, you are all that, and eventually they start ghosting me. So this we see a lot with women. But right now, as we're having this conversation, the majority of women might think that you're wrong. They're saying, like, what are you talking about? I'm desperately looking to give a yes to a man and finally get into that loving partnership, and it's not happening. But what I'm trying to get a little bit more clear is that the conversation that we had, like Jeff was telling me, so are you considering this person? I was like, no. And he was like, why not? I said, because I see like this is not a good match because it's this or this or that. And then Jeff started telling me, well, these are the stuff that you can discuss later on. Like you can, for instance, say that, you know, he was talking about me, guys, with my OCD background. I'm so OCD on time. And I'm like, if you're telling me 9 a.m., you better show up 8:45 at least, if not 8:45, you know, 8:55. And I'm the same way. You know, I was driving to go to a CPA last week with Sarah, and it was a heavy traffic. And I said to her, I said, Sarah, get focused because we're running late. And then I laughed and I said, you know how specific I am about time. And Jeff and I were having this conversation, and I said, if somebody's, you know, telling me that we're going to meet at 8 a.m., and then 15 minutes later, he shows up leisurely having a conversation over the phone, to me, that's a no, definitely, because how am I looking at it on a deeper level? No respect, no consideration. So this, when I'm looking at it in a relationship in a long term, if I'm saying that I'm hungry and you're going to take, you said, oh yeah, I'm hungry too, but you're going to fool around and get distracted and spend an hour and making me wait for an hour, that's definitely a no for me, because we're going to end up killing each other, right? But Jeff said these are the stuff that it can talk about. So do you want to talk about that part?
Sure. So there's a combination of things happening there. And that's what we were talking about is, and let's, you know, I saw some of the comments, you know, and so I said, you know, optimism, we often assign positive, we have a positive relationship to the word optimism. To be optimistic seems to be a positive thing. To be pessimistic occurs to be a negative thing. So this isn't a right or wrong, better or worse, because there are a lot of men that might be pursuing women that are being fools about it. Like there are red flags. There are things that are going to make the relationship not work, but they're still going after it. Why? Maybe they just want to have sex with the woman. Maybe they just want to go on a few dates with the woman, and they really don't care. And when they finally get that, it's like they've got some goal, and then they're like, oh, I really didn't care. And now all the red flags are there. Now they can see the red flags, and they're like, well, you know, I got what I came for, so now I'm out. And that's when, you know, men tend to chase women and then ghost them because they're not paying attention to the red flags. So again, even though we assign positive with optimism and negative with pessimism, it's not. They both can lead us into trouble. What happens is, the reason I got into the primitive is because most people, men and women, most people don't understand and they don't appreciate how powerful those primitive drivers are. Most people are not self-aware what the primitive attraction switches are. And what happens is we think things in our head. We think, well, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing everything right, and them, and this, that, and the other, but we don't really understand what's deep in our DNA causing us to show up in the first place. So what happens is all that stuff about protecting the womb for 9 months, you think that's not relevant. That's absolutely relevant. So you've got a value around time, and some guy is lazy around his time with you, and you go, nope, that's not gonna work. And then you've got this whole story about how it's gonna go with the guy. You've completely determined how things are gonna go with that guy, and you filtered him out. You said, nope, he's not an option. And that guy has no idea that you've done all that. He has no idea that you've done any of that work. But that thought process, that filtering him out, is being generated from a primitive place. You didn't sit down one day and say, you know what are the things, what are my red flags, and I'm not going to tell anybody. And I want to have these reactions. Anytime somebody violates these values and beliefs, I'm going to be really upset about it. You didn't sit down and determine that one day. That's what that's the point that I
So
was
your
making with that.
suggestion is, when we see some red flags over where we're going with the story that because of this or this or that, it's not going to work out, we should let the guy know, hey, by the way, I like this or that about you, but
Yes.
these are the part that I am not sure if it's going to work out in the long term. Because for me, it's so important. Time means, I mean, the way my mind is programmed always, I associate time with respect. I associate time with many things, right? When I'm on this 3D, I associate time with money, with energy, with not wasting time, with many other things. So your suggestion is, instead of just saying, no, this doesn't work out for me, you should sit down with the guy and say, these are the good things that I see about you. You know, I like the way you open the door, for instance, or close the door for me. I like it that you got flowers for me. The flowers were beautiful. Start always with the positive things, right? So the guy doesn't get offended and right away he puts the walls up. Start with the positive thing and then say, by the way, you have all these great traits, but these are this is what's important for me. Because the majority of time, what's important for me might not be important for you. So if we sit down at the beginning, if we see a lot of things are working out, like physically we're attracted, we have a good conversation afterwards when we got together and all of this thing, we just discuss and say, these are the stuff that are really important to me. And these are the stuff that is not that important. What are the things that are really important to you? If you want to date somebody, what are you really looking for? I mean, what are the stuff that makes you mad or crazy, or what are the stuff that are important to you? And furthermore, maybe we can just talk about Moral. Thanks for buying badgets, by the way. Moral is one of my biggest supporters. The other stuff that we can talk about is that a lot of time when we go on a date is the same way for me. I mean, the way I am is I want to have a deep conversation with you, right? If I'm going out and you're going to spend a lot of time talking about, you know, the weather and how the economy is, or maybe politics that I'm not interested, to me, that's not a good conversation to have. Because number one, I'm not interested in politics. Number two, I'm not interested in, you know, the economy or stuff like that. So do you think that when we go on a date, we should just let it roll? Or do you think it's better if when we see the conversation is going, for instance, towards politics, and I'm not interested in politics, should I just kind of, after a minute or two, if I see the person is going on and on about it, stop and just say, you know, I'm not really into this. So how would you go about it? What do you think the right way to do it?
Let me build up to that, because there's a lot that we can do, and a lot that we need to be aware of. So the first thing that I want to represents is that our attraction switches are primitive. Our attraction switches are primitive. They're not intellectual. They're primitive. And if we are unaware of those attraction switches, it doesn't matter. The topic of conversation doesn't matter. And there has been exhaustive research done on those primitive attraction switches. So even though we date as we get older, and it might seem like they make more sense or less sense at different times in our lives, they're still very real. And without going down that rabbit hole, because we could spend days on just that, ultimately, we're still generating from an ancient hunter-gatherer mindset. So women are ultimately only going to even consider, that's the word, is consider. Women are only going to consider men from a provider standpoint. So it doesn't matter if you're talking about politics, because if a man could be a provider for you, you're going to tolerate the conversation about politics. But if a man can't be a provider for you, then you don't really care if you're having a deep conversation. That's and women don't get that that's really driving the bus. It's really driving the bus. You get a guy who could absolutely provide for you. He could be a provider. He could be a protector. He's got status in the world. He's a leader. And women are going to find a way to make that man more of a yes, because he's tripping these primitive
Jeff,
switches.
Before you go any further,
not psychological, intellectual
and I want to see what my followers are thinking about this. Basically, what you're saying is when women are going on a date, the ding dong, the biggest thing they're looking at, are you, as a guy, a good provider?
It might not be aware of it. It's not necessarily that you're aware of it. It's primitive, it's subconscious. It's so often what will happen in that, and I know that you have a lot of female followers, so this makes sense to kind of focus on this a bit, is that it's been said that like the top 80% of women or the top 90% of women are fighting for the top 10% of men. It's true. It's this, I'm not even going to go on a date with the guy. I'm not even going to allow him to possibly be a yes if he doesn't qualify at all of these levels. Only when he qualifies, and she might not be aware of what those qualifications are. That's what the study is of the primitive attraction switches. So once he is in that potential, which is very hard to get into, then it's, oh, is he going to be nice? Is he going to talk about the things I want to talk about? Is he going to buy me flowers? Then it's to kind of see if he's going to do those things. But that guy doesn't even, those things don't matter if he isn't ticking those boxes. Now, I want to circle back to this, because there is a degree of self-awareness.
If you're just going on a date and the conversation, you don't know if the guy can be provider or is he financially, because you don't go on a date and say, what do you do? And can I ask you how much are you making? And are you a good provider? That's conversation starts, right?
No, you don't ask that question. But the way that it shows up is, did he pay for my Uber? Did he pay for my parking? Is he splitting the bill with me, or is he picking up the date? How much hesitation does he have grabbing his wallet and putting his credit card down? Is there any discussion? It's all in that. It's not a verbal conversation. It's a watching how he is around all that.
Right. You and I are on a date right now. We're just sitting down. It's not even a discussion. Are you going to pull out your credit card? Are you going to pay? We haven't got there yet. Basically, when you sit down, the conversation, how are you, or where do you live, start like this. So my question is, if in the next 5 to 10 minutes, you see that the guy is keep talking about how much he hates President blah blah or this or that, and is very political, you still don't know if this guy is a provider or not, right? So what's change?
No, but you've told me, Sudhi, you've told me on that day that there are men that have more hesitation around money and men that have less hesitation around money. I'm not going to name names, right? But you said, well, somebody, this guy is really open and doesn't, it's like it's so easy for him, like it's not a problem. Even if a guy, notice this, when you say even if a guy has money, if he occurs as cheap, you're turned off. What do you think that is inside of you that's turned off? It's an ancient, primitive provider trait, saying, this guy's got the resources, but he's not going to share them with me. Why would you even think that way in the first place?
Off. Stick with me. We haven't
No. This is the most important thing.
For me, doesn't matter. Even if it doesn't matter if it's a guy or a girl. If I feel like somebody has money but is tight to spend money, I would say, why would you do that? It's not about me, it's about someone else. But you keep going off from. I'm not getting the answer that I want. Stick with me. Stay focused.
Because what you're saying isn't as important. I'm telling you what is really the mechanisms that are at work here. The topic of conversation is meaningless. It doesn't matter. It doesn't.
But let me tell
People
you,
want to disagree all the time.
Here and why the conversation matters. Yeah.
Why am I wrong?
Okay, you're right.
I'm not wrong.
Let me tell you why I am wrong. I already expressed this. To me, to hang out with somebody, to have a friend, to have a partner, it's extremely important. Number one thing that I'm looking at, can I have an engaging conversation with this guy? Am I going to learn something from this guy? But I'm looking in a long term. Is my mind is going to be stimulated, be intellectually? Can I have an intellectual conversation with this person? That's the number one, what I'm looking. So where we're going off is that I'm sitting with this guy and I'm seeing the conversation is the first 10, 15 minutes. It's about how you don't like President so-and-so. In that point, would I change the conversation? This is what I'm after. Yes or no? Would I change the conversation, or how would I change it? Would I express that this topic is not in my interest? Yes or no?
You're not. That's not number
For
one.
me,
I know you think it is.
I still didn't get an answer from you.
I know.
Would you change the conversation? Yes or no? Or would you let the
No, because here's the thing. It really depends on the guy's value. So, people show up to each other. And this is part of what makes everything really complicated, is that when we show up to each other, we don't show up in a bubble. We really don't. When we learn about each other, what is it exactly that we're learning? Part of what we're learning is their status in society. So if I was a high-powered politician, or a high-powered, which maybe that's a bad example because obviously I'm going to talk about politics if I'm a politician. But if I'm a high-powered attorney, I'm a high-powered doctor, I'm a high-powered, wealthy, whatever. I have super high status in society, very successful. Do you think I care what topic of conversation you like? It's like there's a hierarchy. I know my status in society. I know my level in the hierarchy. So I really don't care what you want to talk about. And you might make a really big exception and break that rule because I'm such a high-powered, high-value man in society that you're like, I'm going to go out with this doctor. I'm going to go out with this attorney. I'm going to go out with this spiritual leader because they're a leader. They're super high in the hierarchy. They have a lot of status. So you make all sorts of exceptions. But some guy shows up. He's got a job. He's just doing okay. He's just getting by. He's not high in society. He's not high powered. Any of that stuff. but he starts to have a really good conversation, but then the conversation goes off in a direction that you don't like, and you are going to evaluate your value against him.
If the guy has a high status, you start to this point that women are saying yes, and they tolerate. This is basically what Jeff is saying, guys.
Nope. See, she said, I've made an exception. That is absolutely true. You do. It's not, you don't know through words. You know, one of the things that, I've heard a lot of women say, I know within 60 seconds or 2 minutes whether or not I'm going to sleep with a man or whether or not he's the right man for me. How would you know within 60 seconds? It's not because he told you all about his life and how much money he had or what house that he owned. There's something intuitive. Most conversation is nonverbal. It is like 90% nonverbal. So if a guy shows up and he's just the president of the United States, how do you think his body language is going to be? How do you think his way of being is going to be? It's, do you know who I am? Do you know how lucky you are to be here with me? There's going to be such an inversion of power in status that's going to be felt and received by you. Exactly. Instinct. But if a man is around you and he occurs as being maybe intimidated by you and he's shy around you and he's not as confident around you, you're going to read that. It doesn't matter if you have the most stimulating conversation in the world, because you're going to say there's something about that uncomfortableness with me that's leaking some sort of truth about him that I don't like. Doesn't matter if you're having the best conversation in the world.
A yes or no from the followers. You guys, my female audience, do you agree with Jeff? Doing out the guys. Female followers, do you agree that if you're going on a date with a guy and you find out, well, I didn't get my answer from Jeff, because let's suppose that, yes, body language is telling you a lot of things, the way you're behaving, the way you're speaking, and all of that. But when you find out that this guy has a high status and he makes very good money, would you then tolerate anything that he says, any way the conversation go? Even if you're not interested in the conversation, if you find out that he has high status, he's making good money, and you find him as a good provider, give me a yes. Would you tolerate whatever he says or no? Dokhtar said no. I'm just like you, Sudi. I love a stimulus conversation, but what Jeff says is also true. If he doesn't take some, okay, but
so kindness, Sudi, kindness is an attraction switch, but there's a hierarchy of attraction switches.
Absolutely not really.
And I'm reading this, absolutely not really. Right. So where people like me, people who study the primitive attraction switches, what we want to point out, where we often go, is how many busboys have you dated?
None.
None. How many Starbucks baristas have you dated? None. So if I started pointing at how many janitors have you dated? None. So this is the difference. Men are looking for health. We're looking for fertility. That's what we are attracted to, dominantly. So women talk about men being into looks. Well, we are into looks, but we're not into looks in a way, it's a subtle shift. It's like, yes, we are visually attracted. That has been established. It has been scientifically proven. We are into looks. We are visually attracted. But you hear this concept of impossible beauty standards. That's not true. What we're looking for is health and fertility. Even if we intellectually, that's what I'm talking about. There's a gap between primitive and intellectual, because even if intellectually we've said, I don't want to have children, We have intellectually determined we don't want to have children. We're still attracted to women that could give us children and would be healthy mothers for our child. That's what we're looking for. Something as simple as color in cheeks and hair length. Color in cheeks, it what do I want to say? Communicates. It communicates to us that she's youthful and still in her childbearing years. Women who get older and then they go through menopause, they lose color in their cheeks. So we know this at a primitive level. We're not
Jeff,
intellectually
makeup,
aware of this.
You don't.
Why do you think you wear makeup? Why do you think you have to wear makeup? Or why do you think men are attracted to women that have makeup on? Because you're signaling to us that you're still youthful and fertile. The other is hair length. Long hair is a feature of youth and fertility. So when women get older and they go, I'm finally going to cut my hair. I've always wanted to. Screw men, screw society. I'm finally going to cut my hair. They're older, they've lost a lot of the color. And they go, how come I'm not attracting all the men I used to? Because you're not signaling youth and fertility. You're signaling that you're older and you're done with that. And what we're attracted to is youth and fertility at a subconscious primitive level. So these things about, you know, oh, I wouldn't tolerate a man who isn't kind or doesn't talk about the things I want to talk about. Yeah, you might think you have that value. You might put a stake in the ground and defend that value, but you're not going out with a busboy who's having stimulating conversation with you. You're not going out with the Starbucks barista who's having stimulating conversation with you. There's this gigantic category of men that you won't even consider, even though they're going to have the best conversation that you've ever had. They're going to be into you, into the things that you like the things you like. They're going to want to go on all the spiritual retreats, have all the amazing conversations. But you know what you're going to do with them? Make them a friend. You're going to make them a friend. And you're going to say, I love hanging out with you. I love all of the conversations. I love everything that we do together. But I just don't feel sexually towards you. I don't feel that spark. I don't see the chemistry. I don't see the future together. That's the difference. You're going to put that man in a friend category and say, you're an amazing friend, but I'm not going to sleep with you. I'm not going to date you.
Okay, some people might agree with what you're saying and some are not. I mean, in the past, when I met my Norwegian boyfriend, we were together we lived together for 7.5 years. And from what I recall, when I met him, he had nothing, zero. I mean, he was a pilot. He had a pilot, but he wasn't working. He didn't have a job. So I have been in a relationship where I know the guy didn't have anything. And I had to pay at the beginning for everything. But why did I go with him and why did I end up with him for 7.5 years? We lived together for years, right? And I paid at the beginning. I mean, he even conned me for, oh, I have a job right now if you move to Tennessee. Oh, I have a job. We would go to Tennessee and I'm like, what happened? Oh, it didn't go. So we're going to North Carolina, South Carolina, Atlanta, Washington, D.C. He doesn't have a job and all this time I'm paying for it. Why did I pay for everything? Because when I had this deep conversation with him, it was so engaging. And for the first time, can you believe that? Somebody was talking down to me. Like everything that I say, he was like, oh, Sudi, do you have to ask that? It's a common sense. Like we would drive to Washington, D.C., and all of a sudden he would start driving. I said, don't you want to look at the map? Of course, he was a pilot. He was like, Sudi, it's common sense. That's north, that's south, that's what. And I was constantly impressed with the level of his intelligence. Even, you know, when he got a job as a pilot, every couple of years, they have to do a test, and the test is very hard. I would ask him, don't you study? No, Sudi. You know, I'm going to get 100. And he did. So we cannot always say that this is the way it is for everybody. What I'm saying.
Well, let me speak to that. Let me speak to that. So a couple things. First of all, that might be a narcissist, because narcissists learn to lie. Narcissists learn early on that they can lie, and there's way more men that are narcissists than women. There
A
are
lot
women
of likes
narcissists, but there
from
are way
women,
more
my
men because men
followers.
realize.
Because you said most men are
So
narcissists. Okay.
I didn't say most men are narcissists. I
Okay.
said most narcissists are men. That's a
Sorry.
very important distinction. I didn't say most men are narcissists. I said most narcissists are men. And so what men learn early on is that they can con women. If they con women, now this goes in line with something else, which is there was an interesting study done of, I think it was 1,000 women that were polled, whether they were attracted to a man with upward potential or a man who's established. 100% of the women, all 1,000 women, said they were more attracted to the man with upward potential than a man who was already established. It's still coming from that primitive place of, if things fall apart, how's this going to go? Because if you're evaluating a man for ambition and upward, like, is he taking action? Is he upward focused? Then even if he loses his job or the world occurs to fall apart, you know that he's going to be there with you to help you survive. But if he doesn't display ambition, if he doesn't display upward potential, even if he's got a good job, you're going to say, well, wait a minute, if he loses the good job, I might be the one that has to fend for the family. I have to take over all the responsibility, and that's going to go bad for me. So one of the things to kind of bring into this conversation is people partner up, they mate cooperatively. Said simply, are we going to help each other survive? Are you going to make my life easier? Or are you going to make my life harder? So that's part of what we're evaluating. Now, another thing is, there are two things I want to weave into this. One of them is something that I've observed, right? I'm not trying to self-promote here, but I have talked to you a lot, and I've even gone on these lives and talked about these 3 attraction switches that I think are like the 3 core attraction switches, and then like they're kind of umbrellas for what's there for a lot of different things underneath. Then there's kind of a 4th idea I want to bring in. So the 3 attraction switches are a physical attraction. There is a physical attraction that we're looking for. 2 is admiration. Do we admire the person? And 3 is a space for self-expression and acceptance of that expression. So physical attraction's very obvious. It's definitely the most obvious of the 3. I'm going to jump to that space for self-expression. That's the friendship piece. We want a friend. We want a friend. Sometimes we make that a priority. That's a want. It's a nice to have. It's not as high on the list as the others, but it is a nice to have, and it's very powerful. Will the person allow me to talk? Do they like what I have to say? Do they tell me I'm stupid? If they allow me to self-express, but they shut me down, that's like tolerance. They're allowing me to talk, but they're being tolerant of me. They don't really like me. Full acceptance of, saying, oh, that's great. Allowing me to be who I am is incredibly attractive. Now there's the admiration piece. So part of the provider aspects of mating that I talked about, that's kind of built into the admiration. Now, admiration has got the biggest spectrum of variation, because that's where somebody who might be into a deep conversation is different than somebody who is just chasing goals and says, well, I want somebody who's achieved a bunch of goals in their life. That's going to be different for every single person. We admire very different things about people. So these are 3 massive things that we can actively look for. Am I physically attracted to them? Can I find things about them that they admire? Do they give me space to express myself, and do they accept that? That's where I was talking to you about when you said, well, there's this time issue, I have this value around time, and I said, but look for these other things that you admire about the person. Because if you look at these 3 levers and you say, well, I am physically attracted to this person enough, and they do allow me to express myself, and they accept who I am enough, and there are things I don't admire that drive me nuts, but there are things I do admire. Well, it's like you got a lot going for the relationship there. There's a lot, to me, I see a lot of potential. So if you could look at the things that drive you nuts and say, okay, I get that, and I want to communicate that with the person and see if there's some sort of agreement we can form around this and stick to, maybe the relationship has a shot. Now I want to add one more thing into this, which is when you say that you were taking care of this guy, because there are women out there, this will happen a lot, and again, especially with men that really are going after something. Maybe they're in law school, they're in medical school, or they're narcissistic and they're lying. And so, what's happening is women are kind of betting on the guy. They're betting on the guy. I'm going to give the guy a shot. I see the upward potential. I'm going to bet on him and take care of him. In the hopefully the payoff is that he's going to achieve all these things he's up to, and then he's going to take care of me, or we're going to take care of each other in be partners. But that is the idea of, the term is called sexual polarity, which was invented by a female feminist a couple hundred years ago. And it was actually, a 1,000-year-old concept, because I see it in the yin and yang. And if you look at the yin and yang, you will find kind of gender definitions of yin and yang. It's masculine and feminine energy. So part of the whole idea of chemistry is all men have masculine and feminine energy. All women have feminine and masculine energy. We all have both. And it's like how balanced is that circle? How equal is that circle? That's part of that unspoken chemistry that we show up with. So in your case, I saw somebody say that's because you're a boss. You are a boss. You have more masculine energy than other women do. Yes. And so if you were to show up with a hyper masculine man who's just stepping all over you, isn't going to listen to what you have to say, doesn't want to hear any of this, that's going to really that's really where the friction is. That's where the incompatibility is. You're saying, well, wait a minute, my energy, my balance of masculine and feminine is not locking with his balance of masculine and feminine. But if you were to meet with a guy who is a bit more feminine, he's still masculine, you want that blend, but he's maybe got a little bit more feminine. What that's going to do is it's going to allow your bit more masculinity to exist without friction and conflict. So that's where your chemistry is coming in, and you're like, okay, well, now I really see this yin and yang quite balanced. I'm physically attracted to the guy, or I'm not. He allows me to be self-expressed, or he doesn't. And I admire these things about him, or I don't. And a lot of the primitive stuff I was talking about really falls into that admiration. Could I see that he could be this person, make my life easier? Is he going to make it harder? Is he lying? Is he not lying? Is he kind? Is he not kind?
Everything that you say, I would say all true. But as you were speaking, I was also thinking about the divine plan, right? So could it be, like, for instance, when you and I are having a conversation, I say, yeah, Jeff, at this point in my life, I'm thinking that I'm looking for somebody not to be a provider, but to be stable enough mentally, emotionally, and financially. But when I'm looking back, why did I choose this character? Because this character put me through a lot of hardship. I mean, he was Norwegian, right? So he was a ski champion. One time we went to Colorado. This is a really funny story. You guys have to hear this. We went to Colorado skiing, and when we got there, I said, listen, I haven't skied for many, many years, and I know you're a ski champion, so take it easy. So we went to Colorado, and as soon as the car started going up the hills, my blood pressure, I always have very low blood pressure, and my blood pressure dropped down. So as soon as we went, I said, he always put so much pressure on me to get physically. I mean, he was the one that got me into weightlifting and all that. So as soon as the car started driving up, I said, Andre, I don't think I'm feeling well. He said, what do you mean? I said, I feel like my blood pressure dropped down. Don't take me on the highest one. And what did? He took me on the most challenging. And as soon as he got off the lift, I got up and my blood pressure dropped. And I said, I don't think I'm feeling good. Boom, I passed out. And then they got the emergency. And later on, that was a joke. He says, I was going down, and all of a sudden, I see Sudi is coming down with the emergency case faster than me pulling down. Not the slightest pity. But what happened is, I did a lot of things. For instance, at that time, I decided to buy a fourplex, right? 4 units. And when I bought it, everything was on my shoulder. Like literally, I said, I want the windows, the floors, everything I wanted to do. So the construction people come, they took off the door, windows, everything, and they left. And for 2 weeks, I keep calling them. They weren't picking up the phone. At this moment, what did he do? He took a vacation to Norway for 2 months. And I'm living in this house without doors or windows, dealing with contractors, finding another contractor. And one day he called me and he said, how are you doing? I said, it's a mess here. I'm still sleeping in the house without door and window. They came from a city and they said, I didn't have a permit for this. And then I said, oh, I'm sure you can handle it, Sudi. Just go to the city and use your chart, right? So today, when I'm looking back, why did I choose this person? Because he allowed me to go through all this thing, gaining experience after experience. So oftentimes we might think that we are looking for a provider, but the divine plan is something else. And then we get attracted to this gorgeous person, you know, from the outside, the package, and he's going to take us and teach us that you're not getting provided or help whatsoever from this person. So,
So the fact that he was a ski champion had nothing to do with that? Champion? He wasn't just a skier that happened to have a hobby of skiing. He was a ski champion.
Know, Jeff,
and I saw somebody say he challenged you. He absolutely did. So
know.
he is no, that's the challenge in all of this is that it's not as spiritual as you would want to think. He established himself as a there's a concept, there's a term, and it's a terrible term, but it's something that we should all be aware of. It's called hypergamy. Hypergamy is mating across and up hierarchical dominance lines. And that's it. When he can display to you that in some way, when I said some of these primitive things fall under admiration, he was able to display something in your life to gain your admiration, which is huge for women. It's huge. The female to male attraction, where physical might be more male to female. We're visual. We're looking for more looks. For female to male, it is more about the admiration. He's a champion. He's beat other men. He's won in the world. He's established himself as this high status person in some degree, and he's trying to take you into his world, and you can't keep up. But if it was some guy that said, I like skiing, I think it's fun, and you go and you're a better skier than he is, but you have a great conversation, you're going to be like, I don't know, I'm a better skier than he is. I just, he's not a champion. He's not challenging me. It's, it's there. It's at a subconscious level that you're not even aware of. You'll find some intellectual way to say, I just didn't feel a spark. I didn't feel a click. That's how you're going to interpret it in language.
I want to answer Said's question. I pinned it. Should we change our partner to change our new lesson?
No, I want to comment on that because one of the things I wanted to talk about is one of the challenges of today, of the many challenges of today, is social media and dating apps. Because we all have this idea that a new partner, a better partner is just a shopping trip away. We just need to go shopping on the app. We need to go shopping on social media, and a new partner's one click away. And, you know, we're both old enough, which it's not that we're old, but the internet is young. And often a lot of people who grew up with it don't really get that there's plenty of us that grew up in a time when the internet didn't exist. And in that time, we worked harder at our relationships. We worked harder because there weren't as many options. And so when there's not as many options, we say, hey, look, there's not as many options. We need to grow. We need to grow. We need to work, and we need to work together, and we need to grow together if we want to make this thing work. Now, because we have so many more options, or the illusion of options, the moment that somebody doesn't check a box, they're out. I'll find somebody else. I'll find somebody else. I've got 10,000 likes on Tinder. I've got 5,000 messages in OkCupid. I've got, 200,000 DMs in my Instagram. One of those is bound to be a yes without me having to do any work. And that's the world that we live in. So it's not that we should change people for new lessons, because that really brings us to people with a frame of mind of just, you're in my life temporarily because there's something I need to learn from you, and it's very selfish, and then get out of my life, versus really setting a target of, I'm going to continue to learn lessons in order to make this relationship work. I'm going to continue to learn lessons in order to grow and be the best partner I can be for the other person. And then where we really can see whether or not we want to be with somebody or not is, am I putting in the work, and are they putting in the work? That's how I approach women. Obviously, I have those attraction switches too. I'm visually stimulated as well. But if I meet with a woman who's satisfies my visual attraction, she's pretty enough to me, but she shows up to a date, or she shows up to me and she just doesn't occur as somebody who wants to work on herself or, really develop herself, then I'm going to lose that attraction. Where for me, if she shows up and she's like, oh, I'm in this seminar, or I'm reading this book, or I'm studying this method, or I'm doing this, that, and the other, and she's really committed to her personal growth in this world, that's the biggest attraction switch for me, because I know that she's working on herself. I work on myself, which means I see potential in the relationship. I see the potential for it to work.
So I'm going to tell Said, I'm going to come up with my answer too. When I'm in a relationship, whatever is showing up, or whoever I am with, I'm asking, what is the lesson here, right? So how would you know if you don't know what are you supposed to be learning from this partner, this relationship right now? How would you know who to look for, and how would the lesson change? This is something that we have to be aware of, right? So if you change, if you tell me, yes, I know what the lesson is, what I'm learning with this person, then why don't you stick with it and see if you can pass that lesson? Unless you keep going at it, you know what the lesson is with this partner, but you feel somehow, no matter what you do, how much are you investing? The other partner, something that Jeff brought up too, the other partner is not investing as much as you do, right? Like, you see there's a problem, let's go see a professional. He's like, no, it's all BS, and I'm all good with it, and I think we're doing fine, and da. So if you see that no matter what you do, it's not working out, you can exit, because sometimes karmically, when we stay in a relationship that is a lot of hardship, and no matter how much we try, we cannot pass our test, it's better to exit and don't jump to another partner. Don't even look for another partner. Or your other option will be to get deeper within. Where and how am I seeing this person? Because everybody, as we talked about previously last week in our show, in non-duality, everyone that I see in my projection, it's me and it's within me. So how can I take the time, enough time to see everything about this person that's irritating me? How is this in me? Or what are the needs that this person is not meeting? And how can I, this is the key, how can I overcome those needs without needing someone else out there to fulfill those needs for me? There we go. And that,
Sudie, I know we're kind of at the end. I wanted to briefly touch on something. I mean, it's kind of its own thing. It's a bit of a Pandora's box that I don't want to open, but I want to speak briefly, which I think it was Tara that mentioned, can you speak on toxic masculinity? And I just want to speak on toxicity in general. So there is a thing as toxic masculinity. There is a thing as toxic femininity. There is a thing as misogyny. There's a thing as misandry. What do they have in common? Self-righteousness. Self-righteousness is toxic. So that and the reason I make that distinction is because I have always been a champion of women. And in the last couple of years, I've had to become a defender of men. Because in this country, in America, there has been an assault on men. And simply by being a man, by being a white man, by being a straight white man, I'm the cause of all the problems in the world. And so just by being a straight white male, I am inherently toxic.
Jeff.
Now, so I've had to take a bit of a defense against that. And there is toxicity. Toxicity, again, is self-righteousness. So any mechanism that allows a person to assume that they're better than you, that they're right, you're wrong, and to wield some sort of power over you, double standards, I can behave this way, but you can't. All of that is in the world of toxicity. It's all in the world of toxic femininity, toxic masculinity, misandry, misogyny. We just don't want to default. So ask you, any person, male, female, or otherwise, any person can look at their being and say, am I really making this person wrong? Am I really being self-righteous? Am I using some mechanism to wield some sort of power over this person in a very righteous way? And if we are, then we can identify, and you can identify the toxicity in yourself. And and if you look at the other person, you can say the same thing. Because I can absolutely view that in other people, that at times, if they're going to wield a degree of double standard with me or hypocrisy with me, or whatever, I can identify that and say, you know what, that's toxic, and deal with that however I need to deal with that.
Thank you for clarifying that, Jeff. So you change sides, right? You think that men are the victim these days?
Well, I have always had very fierce values around equality. I'm a fierce defender of equality. What I have observed, and this is maybe a topic for a different live, a different time, what I have observed is that we are more segmented into groups than we've ever been. We're not looking for ways to become one people. We're looking for ways to we're getting divided through social media into groups. And groups want to see themselves as better than other groups. A lot of that is driven by survival. We come from a place of lack, a place of limited resources, limited food, shelter, as well as limited sexual resources, limited partners. When we come from that place of lack, our group is going to seek to see how our group has more access to those resources than another group. That is where we get these ideas of privilege and toxicity. It's saying, I have more access to the shelter, I have more access to the money, I have more access to the food, I have more access to the mates, and here's why. And I have all these reasons why. That's not equal. It's just changing the dominance hierarchy. Where I get defensive is where efforts in equality turn into a shift in dominance. I'm not looking for shifts in dominance. I'm looking for actual equality.
Jeff, before we wrap up this live, I want you to talk about, because in our conversation, you mentioned something and I told you to remember, this is a good information, remember that we talk about it when we do the joint live, and that was about how women are not allowing men to be masculine. Do you remember that part?
Yeah, that's kind of right there in the toxic masculinity thing.
Do you want
it's
to
all in
open
the
it
story
up
of it.
so it's very clear for everyone how, as women, we are making guys to be wrong? Is that bird bothering you, singing?
Apologize for all the background noise. I have my windows and doors open to get the nice sun and breeze
beautiful.
in, and
Maybe
I notice
just
a lot of
do a
background
guided
noise.
meditation on that because it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So open that up. How, as women, we're not allowing men to be masculine. The way we're acting, we're making them wrong.
Well, where I tend to go, because it's a very big subject, and where I tend to go is right in line with being made right or wrong is the concept that I use, maybe others out there in the world use it, but the word that I use is inherent sexual worthiness. We have to generate from that place what makes people worthy. And I say sexually worthy because that's what leads to relationships and marriage and children and all that. So I just kind of lump all that together in sexual worthiness. What makes somebody sexually worthy? And a lot of this conversation has supported the idea that men are only sexually worthy when they are providers. For women, there's a spectrum of things that first of all, women are inherently sexually worthy by nature. By the nature of being a woman, they are inherently sexually worthy. Now, that doesn't mean that certain women aren't more attractive to men than others, and a lot of the feminist agenda is to destroy that so that all women become equally sexually worthy. But part of the joke that I was making that day was, that's part of the all bodies are beautiful movement. There's no all bank accounts are beautiful movement. Men are still only deemed sexually worthy when they have proven themselves. And yet, a lot of the kind of feminist inequality and diversity and inclusion agendas are stripping men of their default to prove themselves as worthy without replacing it. That's the concept of equality, without replacing it with other metrics of worthiness. So there's that. That is a huge component to masculinity. Another component to masculinity is, I would say, a degree of pursuit. Men pursue women dominantly. I'm not saying there aren't exceptions. There are women that take control of their romantic lives and they take the lead. But men are generally expected to take the lead and do the pursuing. And we see a lot of laws out there. I mean, this isn't just discussion. We see laws out there that are really handicapping a man's ability to pursue a woman. That is all in that world of not allowing men to be men. We're nurturing, we have a culture here where we're nurturing men to be softer, to be more feminine. They're being made wrong for our nature. And then when we show up that way, women don't like us because our sexual polarity is out of whack. Our yin and yang is imbalanced. It's like, well, where's the man? Where's the man? Where's the man who's gonna do what? What does that even mean? Take charge, lead, protect, provide, keep us safe, shares resources with us, but be kind as well.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. That was I think it was a good live. Was it, guys? Did you enjoy this live? Did you learn something? Some takeaway? Say yes or no. Thank you, Jeff. Have a wonderful... Oh, today's not Thursday. Today is Friday. I made the exception.
It's
Happy
Good Friday.
Then. Okay, have a nice day. See you guys next week. Yes, great. See you all next week. Have a beautiful day. Don't forget to write a lot of comments and also share this live with your friends, because I know there are a lot of people who are... Oh, Kamran has just showed up. My dear friend Kamran Malek Muti. Hi, Kamran. Good to see you here. Okay, so please don't forget to share, because it's by sharing that you're sending the energy out and you can receive more. Love you all. Have a nice weekend, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye now. Bye.